Thanks, Matt. Good evening, my name is John Wilkinson. I'm Chair of Creative Writing and Poetics, and I'd like to welcome you to the first of this year's 3 readings by emerging writers. Every week, new slim volumes of poetry arrive at my elegant chambers. Single chapbooks fulsomely inscribed, sheafs of 1 or 2 for solicited review, or packages of 6 or more on often regretted subscription. Soigné in silk dressing gown and reflected in the cabinet of curiosities behind me, I pass an eye over their colourful forward aspects, curl my lip at the preposterous endorsements that crowd their back covers, the while exhaling contemptuous jets of Turkish smoke, and cast my languid glance on the laddering couplets of gelded surrealism within, before tossing each to my manservant for consignment to the grate. Thus I spend my winters warmed by poetry. But every now and then, once a year or less, I open a book and some vernal revival courses through me. One signal instance of this was when I succeeded in overcoming the jostling endorsements on the back of Margaret Ross's first book, A Timeshare, and saw at once that these poems wore a different countenance from what I had dully expected. And it was apparent, too, that the complex patterns of their stanzas were counterpointed by an intricate syntax capable of taking a sentence through 10 or more lines in play with line and stanza breaks, so setting up a shuttled and syncopated and time-bending rhythmic array combed through such extensive verse. And the syntax is fantastically various. It is rare to find in a new book of poetry a sentence which is anything other than a statement, and this lazy form of parataxis drives me crazy. But on the contrary, it is hard to ferret out of Margaret Ross's quite substantial book one simple statement. So, hers is not a new formalism, always statement heavy, nor a post-language lyricism or hybrid, always statement zippy. How boring new formalist verses, pacing out its metrics in terror of a false move and compelled to deliver orotund statements. So while from one angle, Margaret's poetry might be recognized as the refreshing of a despised mid-century style, its Renaissance linguistic richness tugs about and complicates the first person, and its involved prosody is released from any mid-century subservience to suburban metaphysics or Boston confessionalism. Sometimes her rhetoric may be outrageously ripe, like early John Wiener's or some poems of Jennifer Moxley's. But give me this banked and lush language any day over the phrase-making that waits at the end of every predictable line for the solicited audience chuckle. There is one respect in which Margaret's poetry seems specifically of this time, and it has led me already to write about her poems as instances of a kind of elegy for a regretted world of possibilities. It is as though the plenitude of her verse is an efflorescence, a hypertrophy forced by exhausted soil and acid rain, the grave new world of dearth, of limitation. And we might reflect on this, that it is exactly the recognition of limits that shapes this writing through the pressure of its verse bounds and its internal sonic bracing, as it was greed and total availability that shaped the poetic writing that catches up amusing phrases from the street or the web or commerce under the cloak of irony. It is my hope that in hearing Margaret Ross, we shall not only be hearing an emerging poet. Given the achievement, I find it astonishing that A Timeshare, published by Omnidawn last year, is Margaret's first book, but an emerging poetry, a poetry adequate to our moment's emergence. I realise I've just delivered an endorsement every bit as extravagant as those I ridiculed, as well as giving too much license to my inner curmudgeon, and therefore put Margaret in an unenviable position. But if her poetry can survive encomia from the likes of Jory Graham and Terence Hayes, it can certainly rise above mine. Usually in these introductions, I survey a poet's work and offer some choice snippets. I don't want to go into that kind of detail, since I feel I would violate this poetry in pulling threads from its brocade. A Timeshare collects beautiful but not ingratiating writing, and Margaret Ross's poems demand the sustained attention I am sure you will give them. It's my great pleasure to introduce Margaret Ross.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for coming. A Timeshare. 5 o'clock again in the rented living room. Nothing wrong. Heliotrope continuing to fade into upholstery. Buttons pressing back against the back of the couch make the surface cave, just decorative. Faint gardens stamped on a cotton throw. And that the world. Yes, no. Yes, though. If there's such a thing as time at all, I never saw it move. And if that's so, then what am I afraid of? I hung a muslin curtain to prove breeze, a nimble petal, tall, fluctuating seraphim who keeps watch over me. Q, what are you doing down there in the meantime? X, all day I am an orchard at midday, when the stunned air pauses, bronze and stupid, terse with flies. Don't lie. I'm in the living room. Seconds dropping from the faucet to the metal bed of the sink. This is your one, now this is, now late. Nobody waits for thee on the greeny moor where I was laying all stuck with you. Or the Q, do you recall the dream of a point repaired to when alone? Some to the landfill, some to the promontory, each with a small, smooth stone tapping soft on his chest or clicking against his teeth when on his tongue. Once you thought you would learn what to do with yourself by yourself. Once the stakes flush high as a view from the beautiful private plane, all persons disappear, and he alone looks down on freeways, embroidering the vacant earth. It was still early in my life. X, go along. Touch your eye. Do you know how to do that thing of whispering a fact repeatedly until it stops being true? Return to this apartment after being gone a while to find everything replaced with replicas, identically arranged. The cedar desk had the same false front as before, and fitted with the same brass garland handle, still unable to pull out a drawer because it is no drawer. That was the soul. Home furnished with second-hand pieces. White hooded lamps are nursed to me all night, when I can snap space open like a parachute, make the walls up. When I lived out a summer with a blind man by the sea, he kept a steady squint. I closed my eyes. It was still early then in my brief life. Evenings, every morning at the folding table, painting his toast black with Marmite. Once she was me, we took turns for the bed. A room with everything white except the book spines makes you feel the good kind of dead. When is it? Someone's kid downstairs leans on the bell again. Lived winters half an hour away or 7 minutes on the red line. Times he had me scissor brackenstalks to stanch the mud floor of the animal shed. From space, the nights a hammock swinging gently out across our earth. Each fall slushed over. Bird calls, tiny screws creaking shut your mind. When I used my fingernail to scrape white tallies on my naked ankle then. Think of the long trip home. You're already home. All the loyal idiot details know what to do to stay believable. But you who sit and let the light rust, reddening all around you, waiting for anyone to come and tell you to get up, get up. Nobody is. I wrote this book, these poems, mostly to kind of account for the experience of being simultaneous with so many other lives, which we all have. And formally, I was often thinking of this movie, which actually takes place in Chicago, and which I first saw as a kid in science class. I think it's kind of like a science class classic. It's called Powers of 10. And the relative size of things in the universe. Have people seen this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for people who haven't, it's a movie where the camera opens on a man and a woman by the lake, and then it stays filming them but begins to zoom out by a power of 10 every 10 seconds, such that you begin to see the man and the woman as two people among many people by the shore, and then the shore is part of the lake, and the lake in relation to the patterns of the city, and then the city and the district and the region, and all the way out to the planet, and then through various degrees of the solar system. And then it zooms in all the way back down to the man and the woman and into the hand of the man, through the skin, and then into the cell and the atom and the quark. And I think what I found moving about the movie was that it made you feel so intensely how at every moment, like whether you're conscious of it or not, you're participating in all of these scales. And then the sort of implications of that socially and politically, environmentally, the kind of sinister intricacy of things. So yeah, so many of the poems are written towards that. What, where? Every time I went outside, it had been and was now, weak in the trees, and everywhere the turbulence surround without memory. I had a little girl. I had a girl. She went up like a sail. I asked her what the entrance was. Nothing there. There were between the alleys intermittent persons cycling delivery. So how much can be transferred? How replete? One pine I am. I notch my life into my limbs, lithe needles tallying my branches, doll I name after my name. Go fast, Marie. Talk like you know there isn't any word for that, so to describe it, you speak parallel to silence. Go. I like to do nice things like sing and gardening. Occurred to me like parachutes occur to clouds. I'm looking forward to it now, but I was previously looking from the side. My question is, why? The paintings in museums at night, infrared branches beamed between the flanks of canvas, breathing one long breath from dark to light like colors through the hides of cats. I used the thought of them to fall asleep. Marie, Marie, I tied myself to something upright. The ground looks small. I jumped from there when I was just a boy. Doesn't everyone want to at some point? Did you ask why things were possible or why they are? I pet my suede shoes unto different shades. So walked with 1 foot gray and 1 foot darker. Part of everything is far. I'm speaking to her now while feeling elsewhere, lives from which you don't go in or move. One spot, one slot they live, the pines with no recourse to rooms, their snipped eyelids, whole groves forced to watch the nothing heralding a blade's approach. The metals mined and melted, poured out into molds and cooled and fixed to handles, waiting for a hand to light. I watch them turn. I wish I were a sled. I'm doctored by the thought of them. Now it is time to be in love. Your hand goes there. Here? No, tighter. Say, oh. Okay. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Now say, it makes me sad to go. I wish I didn't have to leave you here. I'm sad. I wish I didn't have to, but I do. Smooth offices the sun keeps, brushed chrome headset, console, billfold. Heat did these to the head to hand. I asked the shiv, what is it I should cut to ease the day? You can write anything you want to down, but it won't change. This sort of presence of all these scales and levels to things is, of course, also in language, in the language we speak and just encounter. And this poem comes out of this experience I've had, which maybe some of you have also had, which is that a lot of beauty products, especially those designed to prevent aging, have these really sinister names, such that, like, if you didn't know it was an eye cream, I would assume it was the title of some really dour book of philosophy. I have a moisturizer called When Hope Is Not Enough. There's also The Total Truth, a serum. This poem is called Age Control Concentrate. It looks like water. feels like water with the ease of water leached. Ever blow a raw egg through its pinpricked shell. A sterner and more cautious thing. Feels like water with enhanced wariness to be twice daily rubbed into the face. It's possible to think, said my grandmother's grandfather, without apparent wrinkling. The skin, a stupid flag, flies any nation consciousness has seized. Star at the edge, X center, sickle where a question was, and now a girl with laser gun aimed at the price stickers. No returns window. Pressed my temple to the streaky pane of the subway glass to watch a fingerprinted black rip by, fast fabric, ending at the billboard of a woman's forehead, blinking back and forth from line to clear. Hunch the self is many-personed sequence. Every day I woke inside another stranger's shape and dressed it in the same red sweater, ditch I'd fallen into, pooled, and would soon under heat evaporate. There's nothing like the sight of repetition purged of sense. I don't know what thought traveled me so many times, its route shows plainly on my face. I've kept from girlhood strict divisions in the head, so what I felt was, as it were, arrested, where it could not crease appearance. Is there no method to flush out the self that wants the others gone? Misgivings drowned, all attention held there in the room where the time is wide and a long, enduring doubt lifts your hand to its paper cheek as an old man singing scraps from the 20s he is certain he is still a child in. And if my features never move again, then? The first half of a makeover is free. The beautician hones a boundary, cutting off the red side of the mouth from the dull, the sepia-shaded right from the left eye. Explains it's best to smooth the fragile lid using the digit with least power. There we are, to be applied at night. There's $90 water you can buy to look like you have never lived this life. Beige ceiling mirrored in the chrome top counter, modeling the thought of a fleeting, brittle, standard issue, cheap, tight, 1 second now, 1 second next, provisional arrangement, where just repeating myself flaws a substance so changeable, I touch it only with ring finger. Less muscle, so less pull. Yes, even if there's still. You can lie yourself in bed and wake up in the upscale public restroom of your life. From stalls step many replicas of some guy in complete tuxedo. The marble was pink. They began to hit them, him on him, all of them, or did, but so no blood appeared, stall doors slamming back and forth and echoing off the marble. Dissolution. What things are vapor? Not the air. The nightstand and the buckled mattress, not the sheet. I take my time. Brass knob, my wrist must turn to leave, its tendons torqued stems to the long bouquet, unfolding livid colors out there on the other side. The future, what you could have done. You could have gone and seen when you have not left, have yet to leave. Gas, we came to realize, was this life, how to put it down. People carry on, dropped voices. Here in whose studio? I always wake before, don't stir. Dim silver bow, the length of me, is kindred to me, sprawled across cool air outside. The windows fogged. Yes, everything does need to be seen through again. Again, I run my finger down to make a clear strip, hypodermic. Some days plucked from extinction by a sharp detail. A bird in the hall I didn't try to help. What things are for. The sheer green skirt I lost. I left a mark, faint whiff of sulfur so the ether caught. A man had half an earlobe gone, his torso broad and blank as a door, and ticking on the other side. I held my hand up to the door to test, and the door was hot. I was just going to say, quiet. Is it nobody there? Tell me how many flights we are above the world. Can't you force me so then I could be forced? No threshold to cross, not the voice, no floorboards and no ribbon wire, no sky stale white of a corrective brace for the street's evacuated spine. It seems to me I've already gone a long time. Did I ask to go? I lay down in an olive grove because the grass was gold and nobody there, and some with a blue rope tied about their girth, width of a girl's thigh, for what reason I don't know. My long hair was a net unraveled. If the thought evaporates, if the thought there isn't any room for when a day slides off and the hissing trees, touch always pulls me back up to the skin, hand the fish know, vague through the scrim of the pond and mindless as they are. Put your head down. Do you recognize yourself? I was trying to get to the other side of love. I had no way to go. I was standing on a subway platform riddled with black holes, stamped flat ancient gum somebody's mouth had worked the pink from. PA told how far things were away. Put my face down, back against slick milky tiles. I was standing on dank air between the railing and a drying sweater. I was standing several inches higher than myself, pitched on blue neon plastic heels. Glass necks glittered down at me from marble shelves. I was standing still. I was. Is that what I believe? I was on something. I long lay fingering the tall, coarse, reedy shore. It felt like candor. His throat clicks. Nobody move. And you such slender interruption of the atmosphere. I watched the sash. I wanted to be held down so there could be no brute space left to breathe. Why didn't you look? Why didn't you look up and seem? Had you no pride? Weren't you free? In many of the poems, I was also thinking about these man-made spaces that sort of manifest a certain idea about where one person ends and another person begins. So like a timeshare, which is the title, that sort of strange arrangement where many people own together one house or one apartment that they then take turns living in as if it was theirs. And then, but other spaces too, certain workspaces, assisted living facilities or offices. And in this next poem, these little waiting rooms that were adjacent to some Etruscan tombs I saw, which were underground, and it was this room right next to where the body would be with like chairs or benches carved out of the rock itself. That kind of space in between. For the souls departed. For the soul departed. From the concrete monument for mercenaries spent in the war, we could see God's trepanned skull, a still dome seagulls drift aimlessly in and out of, circling for a place to land. Start again from the top. For the rest of the site here has been fenced off from public touch, so we lean on a guardrail, looking out across the parched, beige, bristling ground history's stone tombs were found in, some with a little chair cut right into the rock for whom to sit. Historical, for they can't determine where the feeling is, and I didn't know, for the soul imparted facts were dates, and the colors fugitive. You can just make out the coast the haze is stuttering. Down there, people on the beach clap every dusk the day goes down. For the sold out, read me again that part you like that describes their underground ceiling, frescoed white with crimson spots, like the faded bedsheet pulled over my head each day. I'm dead each day from noon to 4 when the alarm rings. Oh, nothing. Come in from the sun. It's too hot to stand. Where the asphalt steams, a man's bare back is melted out of steel, and it's turned our way as he hawks black soap, whittled martyrs on brown strings, all with the same blank stare like a dangled offer. Sentience for rest, for a soul whose parts exist in sequence will be called action. Common from the end, for a soul whose parts or wholes or parts exist in contradiction will be called, sometimes a soul is called. For a part is mutiny, in part regret, where men slid belly down to paint green birds and fish, deep in the underrock I went. I came in from consciousness to find a field where oblong stones stood upright in the earth, like bookmarks, so a mind remembers which one to start back from, where to return, when a soul parts ways with a husked intent, and the argument evacuated leaves no aim, no brunt, no end, no reason for, and the sound cut out, and the color then. I'll read one more poem from the book and then a few new poems to finish. This poem takes place in an assisted living home. Assisted living. For a free surface, the ocean kept its borders paused. For a glass rim drawing feathery networks on the wall, they shudder when the water nods. For the disappearance of the forest, for the trees were spaced door widths apart. Press your wrists hard to the jamb for 30 seconds and describe the standing furniture. Stripped trunks pass on a flatbed truck. The siren tests at 10 and 2. Your arms float up. We called it playing ghost when we were kids, and that's what dying is, subject to constant normal stress, face down. The pieces in that room stay frozen under see-through wrap. Affected areas are stained. The ocean almost empty now. I can describe it just by counting passing cars at night extended into beams like ships. Wake me up. Lie still. Metal bars slide out into the dark to hang coats on. Doors close. The afternoon attenuated. Turquoise carpeting, so it was possible to say the overstuffed green armchair and settee were islands, and the two of them were stranded while they watched TV. It's true they couldn't speak to one another freely, the other subject spiriting the one at hand. A way trained parallel to the received condolences, a railing for a voice, like rows of trees shade passages of wooden doors. Behind them, men and women lie in bed all day, not really recollecting how they came to be here. Rounds go on, the turnover at 9. Night falls, bright colors spring to mind, in beds arranged around the ornamental pond, a bench, another parking lot, a gate, and then the shallow evergreen grove, planted for appearances and fraying whatever sirens take the exit after it. His left hand looks much heavier and paler since, like fresh poured styrofoam. A rigid white he holds at the wrist while he makes small talk, soft focusing the conversation. Comparable to furniture dismantled just by squinting, just by tearing up, the chairs on melting legs, soft chifforobe. I can describe what love looks like nothing's happening. Two people in a room, not even looking at each other, speak. The trees molt paper, gleaming metal ships responsible for steering conversation in between the dead spots drift above our heads. The higher stories, gridded views like ice cube trays from which pale single-family homes are shaken out. Quick burning strokes for swimming pools below a face opaque as any other, actually clear space through which calls drop. Swift, interchangeable hands in see-through gloves administer the new measures. I'm doing fine. Don't go. At 5, I used to pick the light blue off a patch of wall beside my pillow. Habit, though the first time must have been to see what feeling safe was made of. Sure color would go through. Yes, you look like you're doing. So I called this opening gray to the stopped-up transfer points, redundant toll booths everywhere cardboarded over or not yet defunct, slot spit tickets printed with apologies to sign and the bar lifts. It was not her arm that stroked me, since I know she was asleep, he said. It felt as if a concentration of the vacant space itself had brushed my cheek alive. Think of it. Wax morning glories. Paraffin flowers state shifting in the modified drywall twice a day keeps it always warm. Light sticking to the crusts in old linoleum, like shots of oceans spliced into what ordinary waiting room? Waded out to what again today? Waited for some way out, not reprieve. Love lives 3 blocks away from me. I seldom go. Between the narrow channel cut before reply and the reply, a landlocked compromise, erected concrete, upright, subject to minute partitions, on a scale not even visible before the microscope. They told you to lie down somewhere, indoors, late afternoon, a room sun tilting into, cut one slender aisle, offering proof air clotted to dust, and therefore is what looks clear, frenzied, numerous, sight revised. I can describe inertia. I have been there. It looks the same as here. The street convincingly painted onto glass, as if you could go. So I'll read a few poems from a new book that I'm working on about economy and complicity. Art. We were walking through a gated complex being built for artists favored by the government. Mansions in a row surrounded by bare dirt and rugs of knit grass laid for the occasion. The museum at the complex center had an opening. 50 canvases of pristine spring and autumn scenes, all overpowered by fumes drifting off the newly whitened gallery wall they hung from. This shit nobody believes is art, my friend whispered. The fumes were dizzying. I walked outside lightheaded. What a curious pact between nature and man, read the wall beside the hour-long line at the Palace Museum to see a chunk of jasper carved 3 centuries ago into the meat-shaped stone, displayed behind glass on gold pedestal, its ragged edges glistening convincingly as flesh. Finally reaching it, its body-packing body, warm, dense, twisting mass against me, held me to the glass. How close life gets. Art to cut at ignorance with ignorance. After the opening was a banquet where on every table stood a phoenix carved out of a watermelon. Another painter said she'd driven through last year when it was still all broken villages and farms and hit a man. His bare arm bled. He asked for cash, and she'd been fumbling for it when she saw his limbs were pitted with wounds like the fresh one he was stanching with his hand. She called the police. The cop who showed up recognized the man, shrugged, said he did it for a living, lying in the road nights waiting to be struck by cars. The cop advised she give the man some small change and be off. Dessert arrived. She sat there looking at us. Can you believe that? Bleached out prints of painted girls and flowers hanging on what were the inner walls of old homes leveled. Rigged false foreign nothing voice of mine taints everything I say. Beneath the blue skies of a rural province, the girl selling me apples bristled at the compliment I'd paid the landscape. Beauty's beauty, she said. All this only looks that way because there's not good work, no industry. Deep green globes of watermelons growing in the trash lots underneath the highway to the new construction, residents paid off, put up at the edge of town, the dust thick, air rich with toxic microscopic particles turns the day the same vague gold of paintings from the 17th century. Account. 4-inch platform pumps with sequin toe. 3-inch gold stilettos with heart at the ankle. sneakers with suede detailing and camouflaged 2-inch platform. 5-inch boots with rhinestone fringe, a hard rain down the calf. Women so rich they never remove their sunglasses. This is where we live together, said the waxer, pointing to the ceiling. The table where you're being worked is where the masseur sleeps. A skewer for 5 RMB. Blue butterfly barrette with glitter dusted on its wings. This park, where every visitor in ancient times had to dismount and walk a long path to the emperor's palace. Toddlers' sneakers made to make an animal call with every step taken. I'd be afraid to hire nannies, X says. I only trust blood relatives. The other moms I work with feel the same. Everyone's sick of walking through museums to see the lotus shoes like lavishly embroidered fists. Black cloth Mary Janes keep muffling the tread of waitresses, grocers, janitors, maids, and elderly women. A shin-high shoe store mirror for decisions. Knee-high thresholds of traditional doors imply you split the world outside from what you see at home. New York City, 1991. The first day taking care of me, Z ran in heels to chase me. Too much fire in her system, Z said, and every day thereafter wore flats. Each shoe a stare from which the wearer watches. The concrete's softer back home. I always wore heels there. Holographic slip-ons float a solar system, mold infused with glittered PVC ejecting jelly slippers. X all along raised by her grandmother, while her mother cared for me. Looking back, it seems a double image, kid I was and absence of the kid I wasn't. Some needs called rights, some wants, some luxuries. 3 pairs of nylons, 30 RMB. Her socks were flesh-colored, flip-flops cheaper than a coffee. Z. X keeps spoiling her daughter and won't listen to me. She's angry at me maybe still because I left to work in the U.S. But that was the 80s. I thought it was best. My granddaughter's so spoiled she cries even in first class. Some girl in crimson satin loafers buying shrimp. Baby Uggs and knockoff baby Uggs. New Balances with ends stitched backwards like a mirror image. To see my life now in reverse, to see it clearer. These converses. I love you more than Mom, I said to Z. This rabbit hiding rhyme to teach your laces. You don't. You don't know what you mean. Beige combat with a star stitched on the tongue, slingback strap across Achilles tendon. Tell me a story, Ai, of when you were little. Summers, I'd run coins along my mother's spine to ease the heat. Prices scrawled over a higher price in Sharpie. At 16, X immigrated, lived with C, moved out to go to college, grad school, married, moved, and had a daughter in Shanghai her mother-in-law takes care of in the daytime. 2 points where every upright body touches earth. These souls the closest surface to antipodes. I must have asked Z to play baby. I lay there cradled in her lap as though I was much smaller than I was. Z, unbuttoning her shirt, slid off her bra. Baby. That was New York City, 1992. I was 5, a year since she had touched her child. She smelled warm. We only played that once. Z stayed until the 2 of us were grown. Pink rubber, laser cut with droplet pattern. This sole with traction. Steel hook underneath a 4-show buckle keeps my shoe on. This is the last poem. Saturday. It was explained to me, a holiday to enter spring while honoring the dead. And so its celebration was a picnic in a cemetery. Flowers and fruit and fish cooked as her father liked, and a kind of pastry that had been her uncle's nickname. Her aunt was bringing paper iPhones, purses, and a little villa just for fun to burn. I passed carts selling them as I walked up the slope behind the city hospital. A child climbed a parked car, shouting that he was a horse. I took a picture, and the colors on screen looked richer, less treacherous. Downhill, a stadium surrounded by white trailers. Underwear hung from the clotheslines. I took a picture of myself, but I did not appear the person that I was. The picnic would be nearly done. She'd said they'd leave behind chrysanthemums made of cloth to last, and scented so they smelled not like chrysanthemums, but like a woman. Thanks.